The issue I find aggravating in this particular circumstances are several. You got arrested with a gun within 6 months of you being placed on probation.
The future of young Thug's sibling is not looking good. His recent probation violation resulted in a severe sentence, but other stories are being discussed by all. A leaked video claims that he was only placed on probation because, like Guna, he had spied on a gangster. I'll explain. It was the transgression that changed everything. For 5 months, Unfunk just had to show that he could stay out of trouble, follow the rules, and stick to his half of the agreement. It took 5 months to prove that his 11 years in the pen had taught him to think and move differently and to avoid the mistakes that had first lost him his freedom. But sometimes, the streets will still call to you to return, whether you want to or not. The assumption was that May 4th would be another day of being quiet, obedient, and out of the way. Instead, it was the day that everything Unfun had battled for since his release fell apart in the most predictable yet horrible way possible. Along with gang activities on the streets and police evasion, he was arrested in Atlanta on probation. Violation charges for carrying a weapon while a convicted felon. One of the most agonizing and cold judicial dramas you will ever witness was the courtroom proceedings that followed. Judge Aero Glenville was utterly oblivious to Unfun's situation. He would later be removed from young Thug's case because of his own misconduct.
Mr. Greer, I take no pleasure in us being here again, but do you recall when I sentenced you on the 20th of December that I went through certain things that you were expected to do?
Judges and prosecutors who are trying to ruin someone's life while pretending they don't want to do so utilize fake sympathy, which is the tone of the judge.
You understand that you're not allowed to possess or use a firearm while on probation? Yes, Your Honor.
This was clearly not about rehabilitation or second chances, since the judge established a record to justify the penalty he intended to administer. It was about punishment. What hurt the most was the judge's acknowledgement that most of Unfun's violations were mild.
$141.08 in fees. You haven't started any of the community service in this particular case, so I find those to be proven violations. But, you know, those are relatively minor.
Unpaid fees and uncompleted community service total $141. The pistol made all the difference, even though payment plans and schedule adjustments could have remedied these administrative violations.
The issue I find aggravating in this particular circumstances are several. You got arrested with a gun within 6 months of you being placed on probation. And I agree with the state that you're not a candidate for probation because all you had to do is just complete your probation and do what you're supposed to do. Instead, you were riding around the car with a gun in violation of your probation and what this court explicitly had conversations with.
Despite having legal merit, the judge's rationale was completely disconnected from the realities of suburban neighborhoods. In America, one may own a gun for hunting or self-defense. In Zone 3 of Atlanta, owning a firearm is usually done with the intention of surviving long enough to go home every night. The last sentence was delivered with the bureaucratic coldness that makes the criminal justice system feel more like a gristmill than a path to recovery.
For that reason, sir, I'm going to revoke the balance of 9 years and 6 months. And you will serve that in the Department of Corrections.
Decisions made during the first 5 months of freedom erased nearly 10 years of life, or 9 years and 6 months. The arithmetic of mass imprisonment, in its most basic form, is cruel. Regardless of the circumstance or setting, one mistake could ruin all you've worked so hard to create. By August 2025, leaked documents started to surface the family's internal debates about possible plea deals. Young Thug himself said in a tweet that he suggested his brother agree to the deal since it would spare their mother further pain. This contradicts a phone conversation that was made public in which Young Thug denies giving such advice to 21 Savage.
But you seen your brother, please?
Most definitely.
But he said you told him to do that.
Man, watch out.
Man, oh God, he telling the truth.
Man, oh God, he kept. On that same God, he kept. Man, he told me to take a plea and stay alive.
I don't know those.
The response of the hip-hop community to these findings has been characteristically divided. Some view the contradictions as evidence of dishonesty, while others accept that they are the unavoidable result of unrealistic expectations imposed on family relationships. So dedicated, we need to be mad at everybody, YSL Mondo remarked. Then, Mondo's insight breaks the selective outrage that often coexists with discussions about collaboration in hip-hop. If taking a plea deal makes someone a rat, then everyone who took similar deals, even family members acting on their behalf, would have to be called that for consistency's sake. It became clear, as Young Thug's trial progressed, that Unfun's violation had broader implications. The longest trial in Georgia history was that of Young Thug due to delays, witness conflicts, mistrial motions, and judge recusals. While his brother fought for his life in court, Unfun sat in a jail, unable to interact with him, support him, or even encourage him due to the terms of his probation violation. Unfun's offense, ironically, occurred just as the prosecution's case was beginning to take shape. Substantial defects. Young Thug, at the end of the trial in late 2024, entered a non-negotiated guilty plea to reduce charges, resulting in 15 years of probation and time served. Had he been able to sustain compliance for just 2 more years, Unfung would have been able to help his brother through the most important phase of the legal proceedings. Given the outcome of the YSL case, Unfun's sacrifice makes more sense. In June 2025, the case came to a conclusion without any murder convictions when the last co-defendant pleaded guilty. It is possible that the pressure on defendants like Unfun was driven more by prosecutorial overreach than by solid evidence, given that the state was unable to substantiate its most serious charges during 3 years of prosecution. In some ways, recent developments have validated the family's claims of government overreach. Young Thug was able to recover jewels and vehicles that had been stolen during the 2022 search after a judge dropped his forfeiture complaint in August 2025. The judge's decision to return almost $145,000 worth of assets, including vehicles and diamonds, shows that even the legal system saw the buy attempting to connect legitimate assets to unlawful activity. The prosecution had overreached itself. The way this family got from having everything to losing it all, however, requires us to start at the beginning. This brings us full circle to the block where 2 brothers learned that blood has greater power than federal indictments. Toward the booth from the street. The majority of suburbanites, you see, associate Young Thug and the YSL issue with Grammy nominations and chart positions. Young Thug, who was born Jeffrey Lamar Williams in Atlanta, Georgia in 1991, is one of 11 siblings who grew up in the Jonesboro South slums, as those who are real know. And all those kids got involved in the fight. Zone 3 is the area we are talking about, where survival is uncertain and escape is quite tough. In addition, the Williams family was big. They were playing Jump's game, but Quantavious Greer was the most genuine of all the cats in that bloodline, and the one who had been the most meticulous from the start. On the streets, people call him Unfunk. It isn't fun. He finally got down to cut it up, but Unfunk was a full decade behind. His speech patterns and gestures still reflected the wall and the prison. You get that institutionalized swagger by learning how to live in the belly of the beast during your 20s and 30s. But beyond that rough exterior was a man who had recently regained his freedom after more than a decade of imprisonment. Let's be crystal clear about the challenges Unfun faced when he first landed. He was released in 2020 after serving 11 years in prison after being found guilty of armed robbery in 2013. Instead of a county jail or a small reward for good behavior, we are talking about real time. The Georgia Department of Corrections, where there are no games and every day is a mental and emotional challenge, is where this cat spent 11 consecutive years. By 2020, the globe had undergone significant change when Unfun hit the bricks. The state of technology had advanced. In addition to the music industry shifting to streaming, his younger brother had gone from being a local hustler to a worldwide superstar. Blood, however, is stronger than any agreement or commercial deal, and family is family.
Yeah, related.
When Unfun was asked about their relationship, it became clear that this was not some distant relative trying to ride coattails.
Mama's son.
Oh, that's your brother.
The sincerity of their brotherly bond was beautiful. Unfunk was sustaining trap music in the face of extreme adversity, while Young Thug was out there pushing boundaries, creating new sounds, and changing possibilities. Even inside, though, he continued to impart to his younger brother important lessons about concentrating on the music instead of being drawn into street politics.
It just, when I got locked up, I just told him, like, go rap, instead of just going to the street, just go rap. And he just took the advice, he just rapped.
Yes, that is a real big brother. Unfunk was trying to help his younger brother avoid the same mistakes that had cost him his freedom, even from the pen. YSL, often referred to as Young Stoner Life or Young Slime Life, was founded by Young Thug in 2012, initially as a record label under 300 Entertainment and subsequently by Atlantic Records. YSL was never just a designation, though. It was a family, business, a method to unite the community, and a dignified way for cats who had spent their entire lives grinding in the trap to get off the streets. Unfung didn't waste much time pitying himself or trying to take advantage of his brother's accomplishments after he arrived in 2020. Without delay, he set to work. He signed a contract with YSL shortly after his release, intending to use his position to advocate for constructive change. In interviews, redemption was a common topic. He collaborated with Future, Young Thug, and Gunna on his 2021 debut album, My Struggle, which had songs like Real and Mob Ties Remix. My Struggle was more than just a catchphrase. The book was a memoir. Throughout the project, every track portrayed his journey from the streets to the pen to the booth. When you have gone through real time, lost everything, and had to start over, your music sounds different. It's impossible to fake that pain. It is not appropriate to ghostwrite that experience.
Is it overwhelming?
Yeah. I ain't gonna rush it. I
I
know it's gonna come, so just patient.
A person with this attitude had to learn patience the hard way. You learn in prison that doing things quickly leads to failure, that most people never acquire the discipline needed for long-term success, and that everything worthwhile takes time. The family dynamic at the time encapsulated all of the things hip-hop claims to do, but rarely does. 10 siblings from a large family in Atlanta's Zone 3 make up the well-known Williams family. YSL rappers Dora White and Dolly White are two of the siblings. His brother, the late Angela Greer, and Quantavious Greer, stage name Unfun. Record labels were not the only thing this was. In every aspect, it was a family business. That is difficult. Do you all like the Jacksons during the holiday season? A word. The analogy to the Jackson family was accurate for a number of reasons. Both families can move up the economic ladder through music. Both had multiple talented siblings, and they both had to cope with the unique challenges that come up when professional. Goals and familial bonds clash. In contrast to the Jacksons, the Williams family was operating in an environment where success may be seen as evidence of unlawful activity. Prosecutors claim that since 2012, YSL has served as a front for a violent, drug trafficking and racketeering street gang affiliated with the National Bloods. Each chart success, platinum award, and label expansion could be interpreted as evidence of an expanding illicit business. This wasn't merely a token relative who had to take a deal. In the context of YSL, Unfun was developing his own personality, sound, and style.
Like he way over this way. Sometimes I don't know what he be saying. I just vibe with it.
Recognizing that he wasn't always able to comprehend Young Thug's artistic choices, showed the humility and respect of someone who respected his brother's genius while pursuing his own goals. If you are successful in the ghetto, though, there is always someone trying to harm you. And by 2022, that target was increasing every day. Young Thug's popularity and YSL's expansion had caught the attention of the federal government, and prosecutors were putting together a case that would eventually include 56 charges and 28 defendants. The exact platform that was being used as evidence of their illegal activities was meant to be a place of salvation for felines like Unfun. The scene was poised for a calamity. You used to have a criminal activity by an inmate. Every family gathering, business meeting, and studio session may have been observed and examined through the lens of a criminal conspiracy. Unfeng had a genuine and infectious excitement for his upcoming pursuits. This was a man who had learned from his sins and made amends with society and was ready to use his position to inspire others. Sadly, he would never be able to bring his music to its full potential. The family's business plan was surprisingly straightforward.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
You know, he made it possible. He put the money behind it. And,
Pretty much.
yeah.
Apart from supporting his brother's musical endeavors, Young Thug was performing other tasks. By providing him with the tools to effectively reintegrate into society, he was making an investment in his liberty. Haters are always attracted to prosperity, though, and no good deed goes unpunished in the neighborhood. The very loyalty that kept the Williams family together may shortly be used by prosecutors as an excuse to tear them apart. The bond that had held them together through poverty, violence, and incarceration was about to be tested in ways that no family should ever have to. Persevere. What had started out as a sweet story of redemption was about to become a federal case that would ruin everything they had fought so hard to accomplish. Before the federal government showed up, May 9th, 2022, started out like any other day in Zone 3. But it ended with the sort of FBI raid that has become famous. Eventually, the Alphabet guys tried to join YSL, but they failed to show up to play. They destroyed all that Young Thug and his family had built from the ground up.
Man, them folk coming out of trees and all types. Snipers. You hear me? Drones, helicopters, all types.
Yokotti's description of that morning reads less like an Atlanta, Georgia, music industry investigation and more like a military operation. In another country, that's exactly how the feds wanted it, though. Maximum shock and awe was employed to emphasize that no one was untouchable. The purpose of the operation was to intimidate. Using property seized during raids, RICO charged Young Thug and 27 other individuals with 56 crimes, including gang involvement, murder, and possession of drugs. They weren't just taking people into custody, and they were destroying an entire ecosystem by snatching cars, jewelry, cash, and everything else that could be connected to their alleged illicit operation. For UNF, this raid was the most horrible development. 6 months had passed after the YSL RICO was released from his 11-year prison sentence when he was indicted. For 6 months, take a moment to process it. Having worked for 11 years straight, come home to start anew, and made music with his brother, this man was only beginning to know what true success felt like. But the streets and the federal government don't care about your salvation tale. High-profile cases serve as prosecutors' career launching pads. Unfun was charged with theft and RICO violations, among other gang-related felonies, in the 2022 YSL RICO case in Fulton County, Georgia, along with Young Thug and 26 other people. All at once, his second chance was in jeopardy. The charges made by RICO were not merely legalese. They were an outright assault on the notion of family loyalty that had sustained the Williams dynasty through decades of adversity. Prosecutors claim that since 2012, YSL has served as a front for a violent drug trafficking and racketeering street gang affiliated with the National Bloods. All family gatherings were depicted as criminal gatherings, all corporate decisions as gang activity, and all acts of loyalty as evidence of a conspiracy. Young Thug's family saw something quite different, though. By asserting that YSL is merely a music label and lifestyle brand with a focus on fashion, music, and community, Young Thug has frequently denied gang charges. From their perspective, they had created a reputable business empire that provided nearby residents and family members with possibilities they might not have otherwise had. Pressure to flip was applied immediately on the defendants. Federal prosecutors know how to play the game. Bonds are set at unaffordable amounts. Everyone is arrested at once, and the smaller fish are then offered deals in exchange for testifying against the bigger targets. It is an established strategy that has been used to defeat both mob groups and drug cartels. At this point, they were applying it to a hip-hop collective. Unfun suffered particularly from the calculus. It's been 11 years already. He understood completely what it was like to be a prisoner and what he would lose if he went back. He knew, more importantly, how his family would suffer if he disappeared again. His adolescent daughter, who had already spent much of her childhood without her father, would have to see his burial in the system for maybe decades. During the plea negotiations, the cold calculation of federal prosecutions was revealed. Despite claiming innocence, Unfun entered a guilty plea to RICO and theft charges in December 2022. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison, of which 10 years were spent on probation and 2 years were time served. Because of the negotiated plea, he was able to maintain his innocence while acknowledging that the government had enough evidence to attempt a trial against him. The purpose of that plea, though, was to make him fail. He was sentenced to 12 years of probation, 750 hours of community service, and a curfew. He was also told not to carry a gun and to stop talking to his brother, the juvenile criminal, and other defendants until the matter was settled. Just think of how cold that is. A man who had just been reunited with his family after an 11-year separation was now prohibited from speaking to his own brother. It was particularly difficult because the no-contact condition went right to the core of their relationship. Despite being apart for 11 years, these brothers stayed close, and young Thug provided Unfun with financial, emotional, and legal support while he was in jail. Unfun needed that support the most, and now the judicial system was tearing them apart. However, it wasn't even the worst part. In addition to being protected from self-incrimination under the Fifth Amendment, the agreement requires Greer to testify. Consequently, there was an unachievable legal tightrope. In the event that prosecutors requested him to testify against his brother, he would have to choose between violating his plea agreement and potentially compromising himself and his family. These plea terms involve psychological warfare that cannot be overstated. This means that every family conversation, business meeting, and casual chat could potentially be subpoenaed. Throughout his life, Unfun has become a liability who may be used as a weapon at any time. The response from the hip-hop community revealed deep divisions on what constitutes cooperation versus survival. Damn, people really think I told on my own. Brother, SMH, show me in my paperwork, Unfun remarked in response to snitching allegations. Yes, I did tell on everyone. I'm not even going to think about it. Serenity and blessings. Understandably, he was frustrated. He was accused of betraying his own blood due to legal measures meant to protect his family. The bigger picture demonstrates that Unfun wasn't the only person who had to make these challenging choices. After other co-defendants, including Ganona, had already pled out, rumors state that young Thug persuaded Unfun to accept this deal. Each plea deal consequently put pressure on the other defendants to enter into a similar bargain, which had a cascade effect. These decisions needed to be taken at the appropriate moment. By December 2022, some prominent defendants, including Gunna, had already pleaded, causing a stir in the hip-hop community. Even though it was obvious, young Thug persisted in his argument. The federal agents were effectively splitting the accused and then killing them one by one. Family relationships create a delicate scenario in the legal system, as demonstrated by young Thug's alleged instruction to his brother. A recent communication leak claims that young Thug assisted my brother by telling Unfun to accept the plea deal only after others had, and that he didn't snitch. Helping my brother describes a specific set of ideals from the perspective of young offenders that are different from what the legal system recognizes. While his brother awaited trial, it was unethical to watch other defendants reach deals. It is related to common sense. Why should Unfun risk spending decades behind bars, while others with similar charges were being freed on probation? More importantly, why should their mother have to live through decades of perhaps witnessing the disappearance of another son into the criminal justice system? Courtroom logic is not the same as the logic of the streets, though. In addition, the hip-hop community's response to these plea deals increased the stress on everyone involved. Snitching is a serious offense in a society that goes beyond legal jargon. It's about reputation, trustworthiness, and the ability to act with dignity in situations where those qualities are essential for survival. It's a terrible irony, because Unfun's plea deal was probably the best option. In June 2025, the case was concluded without any murder convictions after the last co-defendant pled guilty. 3 years into the judicial process, millions of by choosing not to go to trial, Unfun may have avoided decades in prison when the state was unable to prove its most serious charges, which would have cost him millions of dollars in legal fees and caused him unspeakable suffering. However, Unfun was going to be exposed to new kinds of vulnerability due to his probationary limits, and he couldn't have foreseen that success in the legal system would not necessarily translate into success on the streets. It would not be long before the very pact that was meant to ensure his freedom would become the instrument of his destruction. The dynamics within the family were more strained than they had ever been throughout this period. In court, young Thug was fighting for his life while he saw his brother endure probationary conditions that appeared to be designed to ensure failure. Legal restrictions prevented Unfun from utilizing the very support system that had helped him get through his worst moments, despite his efforts to start over. Thanks for watching. You can click on any of the boxes that are playing on your screen to see more videos like this one.